Millions of voters across South Africa have cast their ballots in an election which many said will be a tough test for the ruling African National Congress. The Electoral Commission says polls were to officially close at 9 p.m. local time. Long queues built up outside polling stations from early in the morning. More than 26 million voters were eligible to vote at the 22,000 polling stations spread across the country. Our correspondent Matuba Malachi is in Pretoria and provides us with a roundup of the day's voting process now that the polling stations have closed.
Polling stations around South Africa have been officially closed, and that's according to the Independent Electoral Commission of South Africa, but saying that people who are still queuing outside polling stations should be allowed to vote. And we expect to see voting stations to close until very late on Wednesday evening, because some polling stations opened 5 hours after the official opening time, which was 7 a.m. Central African time. 5 hours after that, there were polling stations that were still not open due to various issues, including protests, service delivery protests, and logistical issues. So we expect to see polling stations to be still open even after midnight tonight. But the process that will follow the closing of polling stations, it will be vote counting. So vote counting will happen once all the polling stations are closed. Party agents alongside electoral officers will start counting the votes and verifying them, and those numbers will be sent to the main election center where everything is centralized, and we'll start seeing numbers trickling in from then. We don't expect to see results in the next 8-9 hours or any projections for that matter, because as I've said, some polling stations really started late, but 90% of polling stations were opened on time on Wednesday morning. But it remains to be seen if the people will catch up and start counting the ballots, and we'll start seeing projections by at least Friday, because we know on Saturday we expect to hear the announcement of the winner of this election. And this is one of the most unpredictable elections because it had a record of more than 40 parties competing for seats in parliament and in the provincial legislatures here in South Africa. So this was one of the most contentious elections, as analysts have put it. But now we wait and see for the next process, and the IEC, that is the Electoral Commission, will make an official announcement on whether vote counting has officially started or not. But at this point, that is what we expect to happen after polling stations have closed at 9 p.m. Central African time on Wednesday.
That was Matuba Malachi's report now that the majority of polls have closed. Earlier, the president and candidate for the African National Congress, Cyril Ramaphosa, cast his vote in the township of Soweto. He did it shortly after 11 a.m. local time. Ramaphosa was accompanied by his wife and other senior party officials. Speaking to journalists after voting, Ramaphosa appealed to South Africans to vote for the ANC because, according to him, the party was willing to correct what he called past mistakes.
So the clear mandate we're going to get out of this election is to speed up the process of growing our economy on an inclusive basis so that we can address the plight and the needs of poor people in our country. The mandate that we are getting here is we must hasten service delivery. And I've been saying that I don't want any further excuses. I just want us to work and implementing our policies and doing what is right by our people is going to be my overriding concern, day in and day out.
The leader of the opposition economic freedom fighters, Julius Malema, voted in his hometown, Seshego, north of the capital, Pretoria. Malema arrived at the polling stations at 10 a.m. local time, transforming it into a sea of red as scores of local supporters turned up to accompany him. The EFF has grown at a rapid rate since its formation in 2013 after Malema's expulsion from the ruling party.
Whatever numbers we'll receive from our people, we'll welcome them with both hands. It's a mandate. Even one vote counts. We'll accept that those are the results, and this is what the people of South Africa feel about the EFF.
While voting proceeded smoothly in most parts of the country, police in the northern Cape province used rubber bullets and tear gas to disperse a group of residents who attempted to disrupt the polls. The chaos started when residents who are boycotting the elections tried to prevent others from voting. The boycott is over what they say is the government's failure to deliver basic services such as water and sanitation. Land reform, corruption and unemployment are key issues as South Africa's vote in the 6th democratic national elections since apartheid ended 25 years ago. Our special contributor Johan Abrams has more.
The rain came down in buckets in parts of Cape Town, South Africa this morning as people came out to vote in the national and provincial elections. Most of them saw it as a blessing on the 25 years since the first all-race democratic elections in April 1994. Ayanda Holo travelled more than 1,000 kilometers to vote in the town he grew up in. For him, it was a homecoming laced with nostalgia.
Nyanga East is not only a township and a location, but it's an institution that is filled with history and a clear contribution of sweat and tears and people sacrificing their lives to ensure that one day we enjoy a democratic vote and a democratic and a free society.
But Nyanga is also a town plagued by unemployment and rampant crime and reflects the difficult road facing South Africa despite its great democracy. Holo says if you look beyond the label of violence, it's also a place filled with hope. Those that came to vote share his optimism.
We have never ever given up hope, and we were fortunate enough because we do have a program at the Nyanga Arts Center which is called the Artisan School. The Artisan School teaches arts and culture as part of the curriculum in schools.
More than 26 million South Africans are registered to vote and 48 political parties are contesting the elections. One of those that came to vote is still seeking justice for her brother that was killed shortly after his return from Robben Island.
We still have not found closure to the assassination of my late brother, Mziwonke Project. Since Pro's death, we were failed by a number of institutions, starting from the TRC.
Despite the hardships, residents of Nyanga, together with fellow South Africans, remain hopeful and continue to keep the dream alive of a better tomorrow. Johan Abrams for Telesur in Nyanga, Cape Town, South Africa.
The president of the Venezuelan Supreme Court, Michael Moreno, has said that the court rejected the threats made by the U.S. against Venezuelan institutions.
The Supreme Court judges of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela absolutely reject the threats made by Mr. Mike Pence, who has threatened the high magistrates in a disrespectful and interventionist way with threats that violate the principles of independence, sovereignty, and the self-determination of countries.
And also, Venezuela's National Constituent Assembly has taken away the immunity of 7 lawmakers over the recent attempted coup d'etat. This comes after the Supreme Court of Justice asked the Constituent Assembly to lift the immunity of the opposition lawmakers, including Henry Ramos Ayub, former president of the National Assembly. Now, proceedings could be opened against them over crimes such as conspiracy, treason, and rebellion.
The Constituent Assembly has approved the lifting of parliamentary immunity. If my secretary colleagues bring me the document for the top court of justice, I can sign it right now.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. The Cuban in charge of the affairs in Brazil, Rolando Gomez, has condemned U.S. threats and blackmail at a news conference. He said the U.S. is threatening Cuba for supporting Venezuela and standing against military intervention.
It must be clear that the US slander relies on a total and deliberate lie. Their intelligence services have enough evidence, for sure more than any other country, to know that Cuba does not have troops or participate in military or security operations in Venezuela, despite the fact that it would be a sovereign right of two independent countries to determine how they cooperate in defense, and neither the US nor any other country have the right to question it.
And Venezuela's Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza has denounced the United States' interventionism. On Twitter, he said the recent statements and actions by members of the U.S. government verify what we have been saying since January 26 at the Security Council. Washington is not behind the coup, it is ahead. It is leading, planning, and executing it at every step. And Cuba's President Miguel Díaz-Canel also spoke about the U.S. threats. He said, the statements by members of the U.S. government against Cuba and Venezuela have the same purpose and are part of the perverse, arrogant, and modernist plan of the Empire of the North. The dignified peoples will defend independence and sovereignty. Also, the Mexican Foreign Ministry has published a communique rejecting the application of Article 3 of the Helms-Burton Law. It says that the legislation endorses specific actions to strengthen the United States' economic, commercial, and financial blockade on the Republic of Cuba. It adds that since the law came into force in 1996, the U.S. had suspended Title 3, which permits U.S. citizens to sue over property confiscated by the Cuban government since January 1st, 1959. Mexico said that the application of the Helms-Burton contradicts international law. The country said it would protect Mexican businesses that could be affected. After 8 days of walking, the March for Dignity, Peace and Justice is close to arriving to the capital of Guatemala. Marchers restarted their pilgrimage at 7 a.m. on Wednesday after spending the night on a highway leading to the city. They set off from different departments in the country and expect to arrive soon to the capital. Around 1,500 people have taken part in the march, which set off from the town of Quetzaltenango on May 1st. Our correspondent Mario Rosales has more from Guatemala City.
We're on the outskirts of Guatemala City, waiting for the March of Dignity. This march began on May 1st in the western department of Quetzaltenango. Hundreds of campesinos and indigenous citizens are arriving to the city to claim respect for their communities and reject the criminalization of social leaders. They're also demanding that President Jimmy Morales stop the criminal alliance, an agreement in which the president, his ministers, and some other sectors keep quiet about acts of corruption. They also want respect for their lands, for natural resources, and above all, respect for indigenous and campesino authorities. This group has already walked almost 250 kilometers in order to arrive here and make sure their demands are heard.
We thank Mario Rosales for that report. Moving on, the Chilean Teachers Union has denounced the government of Sebastián Piñera for worsening the crisis in public education. At a news conference, they said that many teachers aren't receiving their salaries. They also highlighted the precautioners at many schools, which are lacking investment and resources. They blamed the government for partnering market education and not pursuing policies that would aid public education. The union is asking for a meeting with the Ministry of Education, and if there is no response, they will call a strike at the end of May.
The government and its policy is based in doing nothing, so that public education dies forever. We call on the Minister of Education to explain the whole country the reason why she is dedicated to a particular agenda and not the agenda of a Minister of Education that, as we understand, ought to include as a main function attending to the needs of public education.
Public doctors in Paraguay are protesting to demand a decent pension. Ministry of Health doctors asked the government to enact their retirement law, which was approved by the Congress last Thursday. The protesters demand the improvement of labor conditions, including the option to retire following 30 years of service and from the age of 60 with a pension meeting 100% of their salaries.
We are claiming with strength and real belief What is our right? The medical sector has been ignored for decades, and they are demanding that we work until we die. The current pension system obliges us to work and contribute for 40 years, when the average doctor is dying at 60. We have to reach the age of 84 to get a pension.
Argentina's President Mauricio Macri has sent a formal request to the opposition, business people, labor unions and religious groups for a national dialogue on the country's economic crisis. But it's raising concerns among the opposition since it comes several months ahead of October's general election. Our correspondent in Buenos Aires, Edgardo Esteban, has the details.
President Mauricio Macri has called on the opposition, the business sector, and different churches to help him look for a solution to the serious economic crisis in the country. Inflation cannot be stopped. It's estimated that it will continue to increase. The unemployment rate also continues to rise, and many industries are having production problems. On top of that, the measures imposed by the International Monetary Fund are still choking the society. As a result of all that, some members of the opposition have agreed to the dialogue, but others have expressed doubts because they say that the dialogue isn't about fixing the problems, but instead it's an attempt by Macri's government to help its image ahead of the coming elections in October. Next month, political parties will choose their lists of candidates and start making political proposals about how to solve the country's economic crisis.
We thank Edgardo for that report. Belizeans are voting in a referendum on the decades-old territorial dispute with Guatemala. Voters are to decide whether Belize should take its border dispute with its Central American neighbor to the International Court of Justice. The territory of Belize has been claimed in whole or in part by Guatemala since 1821, the colonial area. While there have been several attempts to settle this dispute with no final resolution, several problems both on the land and sea still exist.
This controversial location persists.
Trinidad and Tobago's police commissioner says the bullet that fatally struck a 14-year-old girl during a police shootout with an alleged criminal gang was not fired by his officers. The autopsy reported for the teenage victim, Naomi Nelson, concluded that she was shot to the back of the head. It's unclear whether the teenager was running away from the shooter or if she was a casualty of a stray bullet. But the police commissioner says investigations have revealed that his officers are not to blame and they were forced to defend their lives.
Look at where the police vehicle was. Point again, please. The police vehicle, where would he have fired? Up north, towards the X on top. The X on top is who they shot at. The X on top, point at the X on top again, please. They fired towards the police vehicle. What is behind the police vehicle? The young lady.
Do you believe an alternate action could have been taken? Perhaps they could have tried to stop the fire, the exchange?
Yes, no, agreed, yeah. Because if the person was shooting at the police officer, he should have done a matrix and spun around and then seized the weapon. You watch too many movies, so if someone is firing a gunshot at you and firing, the only thing you could do to save your life is to fire back. You watch too many Avengers movies. It doesn't work that way.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. The president of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Hassan Rouhani, has announced that his country will abandon part of the commitments made in the nuclear agreement between Tehran and the G5+1 and has given 60 days for negotiations. Rouhani said that it was a necessary measure to protect national security and the Iranian people, who are facing extensive sanctions applied by the U.S. President Donald Trump. Rouhani also pointed to the failure of Europe to comply with the agreed program. The decision was notified through a communique issued to the ambassadors from the United Kingdom, France, Russia, China, and Germany, countries which form part of the agreement, following the unilateral exit of the United States a year ago.
In the message we've delivered to 5 countries, we've said very clearly that if they use the steps that they've taken as an excuse to refer Iran to the United Nations Security Council, they will be given a very firm answer. I've explained the steps involved in this firm response in the letter sent to the 5 countries. Our intention is clear. Our people must know that we haven't left the nuclear agreement. The Iranian people shouldn't think that the agreement isn't still in place. The agreement is there and will stay in place. But today, we've shown the other side of the G5+1 coin. This is the same nuclear agreement that says that if others don't comply with their obligations, then we can also reduce our own obligations. Today, we are announcing a reduction of obligations. We aren't leaving the nuclear agreement.
The Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif said that his country, much like Russia, continues to comply with their commitments with respect to the nuclear agreement.
Our country and Russia are the 2 countries that are committed to the integral plan of action, and we have shown our commitment in practice. Many other countries are only claiming they are committed, but are still to take any actual measures.
These declarations were backed by the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, who said that European countries should help to find a solution.
We hope that our colleagues, and most of all those from Europe, offer themselves as volunteers to find a solution to the problem created by the United States, and that they comply with their obligations.
The Arctic Council ministerial meeting in Finland has concluded without a customary joint declaration due to the U.S.'s disagreement over climate change. This is the first time the meeting failed to issue a declaration, which usually serves as a guideline for the next chairing country. In the end, member nations signed an altered joint statement which reaffirmed their commitment to peace, stability, and constructive cooperation in the Arctic, but left out the issue of climate change. In Nigeria, 9 people have been killed in 2 separate Boko Haram attacks. Fighters packed in trucks stormed into the village of Molai just before sunset on Tuesday, as villagers were preparing to pray and break their fast for the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. They killed 6 people and burned dozens of homes. In the other attack, Boko Haram fighters ambushed and killed 3 farmers near the town of Gonduga. Sudanese protest leaders have threatened the ruling military council with more civil disobedience. Speaking in a press conference on Wednesday, Sudanese protest leaders accused the country's military rulers of delaying the transfer of power to a civilian administration. They're vowing to launch a new phase of nationwide demonstrations. Thousands of people remain camped outside the military headquarters in Khartoum. The 10-member military council late on Tuesday said it agreed to the overall proposals, but had, quote, many reservations.
We warned the military council of the continued escalation against the activists and demonstrators who are gathering in the street. Incidents in recent days have been recurrent, beginning with the incident of Nayala, which resulted in the death of a martyr.
Meanwhile, some protesters in Sudan have turned to art, comedy, and music to express themselves. At an ongoing sit-in in Khartoum, they have gone from using graffiti on the walls and holding concerts to holding mock press briefings on the situation. Drivers for ride-hailing apps that are seeking to replace conventional taxi services have gone on strike across the globe. Workers at companies like Uber are demanding better pay, transparency, and support. The company is paying its executive millions of dollars while workers are struggling to make ends meet. The apps have also been embroiled in legal scandals across the world because they classify their drivers as self-employed. Doing so means they have fewer legal responsibilities for employee welfare. The strike has received attention from political figures like U.S. presidential candidate Bernie Sanders. He said he stands in solidarity with those on strike for a dignified life. In the UK, Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn offered his support, saying Uber cannot be allowed to get away with huge payouts to CEOs while refusing to pay drivers a decent wage. And drivers were also on strike in Brazil as Uber prepares for its initial public offering on Friday. The company expects to be valued at $90 billion, and the disparity between that valuation and drivers' pay is a cause of grave concern for many.
What concerns us, in a political way, is showing that if they don't respect us, who are their partners? Who allows them to function? If they don't respect us, who is going to guarantee that they will respect investors? Knowing all the necessary compliance with corporate management and everything else. If they don't respect us, who is going to guarantee that they will obey those rules of the financial markets?
And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.